Welcome to the Practice Playbook Podcast, your go-to resource for legal professionals, mediators, and entrepreneurial experts building modern, profitable, and purpose-driven businesses. I'm your host, Susan Guthrie, attorney, mediator, and #1 best-selling author with over 35 years of experience. I'm a former chair of the ABA section of dispute resolution, and I've helped thousands of professionals build practices they love through my books, coaching, and training programs. Each week, I'll bring you real-world strategies, mindset shifts, and behind-the-scenes insights to help you grow with clarity, confidence, and impact. Let's dive in. Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Practice Playbook Podcast of the new year. But before we dive into our episode, I'm also excited to share with you that this week marks the launch of my latest Practice Playbook series book entitled The Business Plan Playbook. This one is a practical guide, as always, created specifically for dispute resolution professionals and legal entrepreneurs who want to build a practice with clarity, intention, and direction. A business plan is not about predicting the future. It's about making thoughtful decisions now, especially in a profession that is changing as quickly as ours is. And that brings me to today's conversation on the podcast. My guest is Lawrence Kolin, who is a highly respected mediator and arbitrator who has spent nearly 25 years resolving complex cases across state, federal, and appellate courts. Lawrence has practiced through enormous shifts in how we work, from in-person to virtual, from paper files to AI-driven tools, and yet his message is remarkably steady. Because all the technology and all the change, the fundamentals of peacemaking have not changed. Human nature has not changed. And what truly moves people toward resolution remains deeply human. So this conversation is about getting back to basics, building trust, and focusing on what actually works in the room, no matter how the tools evolve. So let's get started. So Lawrence, thanks so much for joining me today. I very much appreciate kicking off the new year with insights from someone like you who has built a successful mediation practice of almost 25 years. That's really a significant time in the field, and I know you have a lot to share with my listeners. So thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, it's hard when you say that. Boy, we've had a lot of changes, and certainly we're in the precipice of a whole new era of this. But I thought about the new year, and I thought about a theme for myself and others, and it may be just going back to basics. I think when I was invited to this, I started to think about my own practice and then what you've brought, which is great stuff to mediators all over the country, and looking at with the sea change that's occurring, how we can center ourselves. And despite all these advances, get back to what we do well and keep it going through this and make sure that we're getting the outcomes that our clients want.
And I love how you pull that together, because working with so many professionals the way I do, what I hear from so many is that they are feeling a little untethered right now because change is coming at both the world at large, but our profession, a lot of positive change, but also a lot of change that's a little difficult or hard to know and understand. So that honing back in on the basics, I think, is a great place to start as we enter into 2026. And I know one of the things that you saw as an area of focus is really that timeless core of why we're peacemakers, why we're in the peacemaking business, as some of us like to call it.
Yeah, we talk about 25 years, but it's really like 3,000 years that people have been sitting down and hashing stuff out. So what worked then still works today. We're facilitating, we're listening, we're storytelling, we're letting the self-determination happen. And so that same fundamental set of skills remains despite the technology advances, the shortening of the session, the not being in person together around that table. We are still able to use those basic things to get us to a deal. And that sense of fairness, empathy for the parties, some ethics and professionalism, those things get you engaged in it. And hopefully on the other side, you have something to put down on paper and get signed. And so we got to do that by Adobe Sign, DocuSign, all the things that we have, the neat doodads, but it's the same basic function that we've performed for thousands of years.
You mentioned mediation, and these skill sets have been around for 3,000 years. I remember reading somewhere that the first known mediation was in Mesopotamia about 3,000 years ago. And they know this because they found it chiseled into a tablet. So now you're talking about we're
tablets
using
and
DocuSign. Yeah, we've come very far and not very far at all. But that's such a wonderful analogy of this is the core skills of what we do in helping people resolve conflicts and resolve their disputes and getting to a deal, which is an ultimate goal, has been around for 3,000 years. And what helps us as the peacemakers in the room, people to get there, are the skills. And one thing I think so many of our colleagues are struggling with right now is the way technology is taking over the field. And you mentioned some of the things they've come into play, doing everything virtually, using technology for a lot of the things like getting paid, signing things, doing all that. And then AI, which we will talk about, but is the current technology pain point for people. I have always said what sets us apart, at least in the mediation field, is that those core skills are very human, and you can bring all the technology in the world into it. But if you don't have those human skills, mediation isn't happening.
Well, you and I, when we first spoke, we talked about our early days as associates at law firms and bringing these phone book sized computers in and having the senior partners look at us sideways. I mentioned mine gave me a dictaphone and say, throw away the computer. So I think those don't move with the times. We'll get left behind. I think we all have to be proficient with the tools that are approaching us and figure out what works for us. I think having the experience is really what counts. Lawyers really seek consistency. They want to be with somebody who's a natural. They want to have their client have a good experience and not be in a formal setting like a courthouse. And that's what you can provide as a human.
Robot's not going to do that for you.
Yeah, there's just ways of getting selected in the past that still they work. The word of mouth, just being with somebody in their presence in the odd in-person mediation really leaves an impression on people. But I think you can do the same with the Zoom. You use the hand gestures, you do the things to try and keep yourself in control of the process. Even though you're trying to make it comfortable for everybody, you are the one who leads it and make sure that it functions and that utilizing the technology doesn't get in the way. And of course we have hiccups and we continue stuff on the phone, and we can do stuff if we impasse for some reason that we're going to keep the negotiation going. We're texting, we're doing the asynchronous negotiation. There's lots of things that are helped by all the doodads. You're still doing things that are what your skill set is, why you were hired.
Right. I love the doodads, but I also, that idea, I've always thought one of the things that Zoom got right, at least for mediators, is that they call the mediator or the person who convened the meeting the host. And you just referenced that, right? That's the skill set that the human brings into whatever room that we're in. If we're in a conference room, if we're in a Zoom room, whatever these different rooms are, you, the mediator, are the host. You're the one setting the tone. You're the one who's bringing, I think it's really a great insight that you said that attorneys want their clients to not have a courtroom experience.
You're having a certain comfort, right? To have people let their hair down in their caucus room mostly. There's things that are happening nationally that are doing away with the joint session. I'm sad to see that. I like to have everybody at least look at each other if they're going to go through a dog and pony show and everything great. If they're just going to say hi and then adjourn to the rooms and get the positions going there, or even before we start, it's all a designer process. There's no one way to do it. And I think with experience comes, okay, what's going to work with that? And of course, we always talk, you do too, about getting with people in advance and making sure they're comfortable with the tech so they can attend. Most everybody's had a Zoom with their family. They can get on the iPad or the cell phone and join from a web browser. It's not a big deal. So I think we've gotten over those things in the last few years. But the idea that it's still somewhere that I'm going to talk to a new person that has no dog in the fight, that is going to take and listen and kick around ideas and test positions. And those are things that I think, have to continue to do well, despite whether we're getting help, a few more ideas from a machine, and being transparent about using stuff that too. I think that's all evolving, the ethics of that and the disclosures. We're also are we trusting the papers that we're getting and not getting? Sometimes I find myself hunting this is a significant case. Where is all the stuff that I'm supposed to be learning about it? And I got to go do the sleuthing in the docket. And we talked about how you go and you only find out so much. And sometimes you have to register for a clerk of court and you have to do all these. So you want to try to encourage the lawyers too, to use things to help to synthesize the information, get it to you, and to get it to each other.
Yeah. It's not a secret, or it shouldn't be a secret.
Yeah. You're gonna roll it out in your negotiation. Why not let them have it in advance? Digest it, get it to the decision makers, and have it be part of the meaningful resolution of the case. I just really wish that would happen more often. I know everybody's running from fire to fire, and it's tough to be a lawyer in this world where everybody wants an answer right now. But it does help the neutral a lot. And we, of course, can do the homework, but it gives us a little bit of a boost to go into something with some knowledge.
Important point that you're making there is that a good mediator also tries to work with the attorneys in the case to help them get the case ready for that mediation. So one of the things that I would do is often do exactly what you're talking about in a pre-mediation. I'd encourage that sharing of information and you have to take people out of their advocacy litigation mindset and get them into the problem solving and deal making mindset. And that can start before the first actual mediation session.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having a way ahead, at least in each lawyer's mind. Maybe we take some different routes as we get into the negotiations, but I love when it's a complex case to have a document that's been shared. So we have some language. We're not going to spend the last 3 hours of the mediation massaging commas and stuff, where we have a language. And if it's an IP case, we have a licensing agreement or something going that we can talk about that's tangible, that the client understands. You have a CFO there, or somebody who wants some work that was done on the way in, rather than to have to get to the end of the day and that still has to get done. Now, maybe there's a weekend in between and Monday everything fell apart.
We've all been that. And another point that goes back to those basics, but this is one, is you've cracked the code of having a pretty full schedule of clients, right? They're finding you, they're selecting you. You've got your calendar is generally pretty full. But for a lot of mediators, especially our newer colleagues who are joining mediation maybe from a prior litigation or advocacy practice, how neutrals really get chosen is a bit of a mystery. They think it's one way.
And yeses, right?
Yes, it's a different thing than an advocacy client hiring you.
Yeah, I think that there's this old saw, you're only as good as your last mediation. And it's funny, but if I meet a new lawyer at a mediation and we get through it all, and that person, even if they were difficult or something, I might have a new client after that because they didn't know anything about me and I got them whatever relief for their client. And I think that speaks volumes when people that you didn't know, the one that sort of convinced the other side to hire the same person. And then there are other firms that are, just pick one. I'd rather you be comfortable with the person writing the check. And you can ask lawyers, they're very suspect about different ways of selecting. But of course, we have all of our social media presence. We're becoming our own authentic selves on all of this video clips and these kind of platforms, which I think people want. They want to know what I'm getting, right? Rates are not cheap. The time they're spending with you is valuable. So they want that sense of, okay, who's this person? I don't even know what my digital footprint is anymore. It's just beyond my ability to go deep into Google page searching. But it's the idea that you put yourself out there and you say what you do, and then people get around and say, yeah, he or she can do the job. That's half the battle. But you're right. People don't take into consideration that it's not getting a client in a law firm. You have to have both lawyers and perhaps sometimes their client, whether that's a business client or insurance adjuster or risk manager, somebody say, okay, and you better have not crossed one of those people. Let's say the lawyer says, Susan's great, but somebody else didn't think that. And now kibosh on you. So it's really fraught with a lot of pitfalls out there. But I think the idea in this day and age is don't be all plastic. You have to have those conversations, those luncheons even. Show up in person where it's available. There's really few events, but at bar associations, things that you're going to be there in person, pressing the flesh, not just selling your wares, but talking about family stuff or whatever.
Yeah. Be a person, being authentic.
Being the human. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff goes a long way. And it's just the oddest times when people that you've done that with, months might go by, suddenly you're the top of mind about a certain case. And cases are personalities. You have to fit the dynamic. Some people want a hammer in this case. Some people want someone who's nuanced. Some people, they want a real evaluative type. Other people want a facilitator. So there's no one recipe for getting signed up all the time, but you do have to do these things in order not to be lost in the crowd.
So great that you say there's no one recipe, but there are, what I hear you saying, are there are two things that are pretty important that have been a part of your success in filling that calendar. First one is reputation, right? That's that people knowing that, yeah, he's good at what he does. You happen to be with one of the premier mediation firms, certainly lends. I've always told clients of mine that if they are with one of the great panels or one of the really great firms, that adds an immediate luster. Reputation is a part of it.
Good housekeeping seal of approval, right? But I was on my own too. So I remember doing all of the stuff, cheap bottle washer stuff, taking the case in, doing the notice, sending the bill at the end, getting the Windex out, the pledge, cleaning the table. So I think it doesn't matter if you're on a giant platform or you're still a solo, you're right. There's these basic things that people use to evaluate whether to hire you. And giving yourself over to some of that stuff, not being one thing fits all. It's trying to also let this technology and stuff help you clear your day out so you can do the thing you want to do, which is mediate. Online calendaring systems, Calendly, things like that. Those all help you become more efficient and get your time back that you're not spending with the people in caucus, but your family.
Right. Or doing the actual mediation and doing the best job you can because you have that skill set that you were talking about. But the other aspect of getting hired that I think people lose, because they reputation, your certifications, your qualifications, those are something people spend a lot of time on. But the one that I think they don't know they have as much control over as they do is building trust. And they think for most mediators and for all of us, right, we start building trust in the room when we have the people there. But you're an expert. I see you all over LinkedIn. You're a great thought leader. You put out a lot of content. And what that does, it's the whole reason I wrote the book, was that helps you start establishing trust in the people who see those thought leadership pieces long before they may even ever meet you or need you. And you're really good at that. So what can you say about building trust? Because I think it's just such an essential element.
Well, I do think that when you're dealing with folks that you've never dealt with before, it does give you a little bit of an invitation because they've seen something that and I usually just try to make it a piece that I found interesting, that I thought the people that I like to do work for, I'm not going to be doing your domain of divorce and all that, but no, the commercial, the tort case, the IP case, things that I want to be found doing and get hired for. But also, I'm just a curious person. And then the other day, I just thought everybody's putting a turkey with a Thanksgiving. I found this article. I didn't know that the Ocean Spray Cranberry guy was a lawyer.
Really? I didn't know that either.
The canned stuff that I have every year. Was
jelly,
the idea.
the red jelly that wobbles on your table.
Way to be both a holiday spirit, but have a little piece of lawyerly stuff in there. We get a bad rap. The legal profession is the butt of the jokes and everything. But we help thousands of people every year. Each of us are doing things, little good deeds, little peacemaking mitzvahs, as it were, to get things done in people's lives so they can go back to living and not worry about the hearing coming up, and go back to business and not worry about how much it's costing me in legal bills. And so these are really things we have to remind ourselves why we went into this. It's really a very rare occasion now that I'm getting a hug, but I used to at the end. And that was
the virtual hug.
An affirming act. You did something that somebody really appreciated. And you may not have thought about those things while you were going through the day, but that little reminder of why we went into this in the first place is really a great motivator.
I love that. It reminds me of, I remember very distinctly in the first year, when I transitioned from my litigation practice into a solely mediation practice. And the difference is I was doing divorce work, but getting hugged. I got hugged all the time. I got hugged by both sides
Yep.
of the matter. I had, in my first year of divorce mediations, I had 3 reconciliations where they
Wow.
came to the table and through the discussions that we had there, they decided to give it another shot. Whether that's neither here nor there on the success scale, but for me, I'd never had that in 20 years as a divorce attorney. And just the overall feeling of walking out of a room, as you just said, knowing that I'd actually helped some people, either
It's
put
a
that
really
behind them in a
resilient
better way.
process that you can see the product of, not in just the written agreement and the sense of relief that people have, but this idea that you can actually preserve client relationships that were soured or may have never. I've got people back into bed. That's not always the greatest legal advice. When the mediator sees an opportunity for win-win, it's always what you try and at least put forth. It's not your decision. You're not going to tell them what to do. It can be really satisfying if they choose that route.
Yeah. No, it's actually a really good practice for everyone who's listening, I think, to go back to their why for doing this, which is a lot of what we're talking about. But let's shift to this, what we referenced earlier in the episode about kind of the earth moving under our feet a little
Right.
bit. We're in a bit of a world where things are changing a bit, and a lot of it is because of the technology. And one thing that I know you've focused on is the information, what you call a paradox. And I love paradoxes because we have so many of them, but modern mediation has this information. It's almost, I can't call it the information problem. So maybe information paradox is the better term for it. Let's dive in there.
Yeah, it's really weird how we have almost unlimited data and that we're not really using it in terms of evaluating the case and being given it, I said, in advance, which helps. And that's not just for the mediator, that's for people who've got to talk to somebody who's a vice president of this or that, or an owner or whatever it is, a founder. Somebody's got to make a concession and get something settled, and they're going to want to know as much as they can about it. And that's not just garbage in, garbage out stuff that you can make look pretty and bill for, but it's actually getting to what is a creative solution? What is something that we're not thinking about? How can the stuff that we've spent all this money discovery on actually be put to use in a position that we're not going to save for trial, that we're actually promote at the caucus and let the mediator convey it and let them have this sense of risk aversion that may just produce a settlement. So those things, to me, I think the tech is helping in terms of gathering up stuff and organizing it. And maybe some of that is not so great. Our legal research still needs a lot of work in different products. The fellow in France that's cataloging all the hallucinations, I think we're up to over, I think it's 400 plus hallucinated citation cases that are pending with sanctions and all kinds of different penalties, and mostly on the lawyers. And
we've had judges have to withdraw some opinions lately because there have been inaccuracies and material misrepresentations in their opinions.
Nobody's spared in this.
No.
It's part of the growing pains. And I get that people who will need a shortcut every now and then. But just like we did, you remember digging in the pocket parts?
Yes.
And the shepherds and all and I know the younger people listening won't even know what this stuff is. You went to find the most recent loose leaf thing that you could find to make sure your citation was not going to get challenged as you went to the courthouse and stood there trembling while you presented the case. I think we're just going to get through that. I think the stuff is going to get better. I just went to this whole Future of DR conference that AAA put on with folks from CPR and other great organizations. And I think everybody is excited about it. But at the end of the day, we need humans because AI can tell us what's in the file, but the human can tell us what's not in the file. The human can read the characters, the cast of characters that come into the door. You were saying, how am I going to establish rapport with this guy? And if you get a heads up from a lawyer that, this lady's a tough cookie, and you know how you might want to deal with that on the way in rather than discover it by just talking about the weather, it helps.
Oh, it's very helpful. And part of it is working with our advocates in advance, but the advocates have to be ready to work with us as well. And that's a constant as you mentioned earlier, they're very busy. They have a lot of cases. I remember my litigation schedule. Litigation practice is very much the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and the squeaky wheel is the next case that has to be ready for a hearing so very often that prep time doesn't happen as much, but it really is one of the keys to successful mediations when you can build it into the process.
Yeah, it's just the bandwidth that everybody's got less and less of, and you're very good at telling people how to get their time back. But I think there's other things about our process that are built in, again, fundamentals, confidentiality. Okay, why not, if a case is, you have somebody crying poor, and you could bring in the accountant and do it under the cloak of the confidentiality and say, do it at the opening and show the books. And really, it's beyond puffing. It's now, here's the dollars and cents. This is what we can afford in this case. I've had that happen and work out, where someone was going to give the keys to the building versus write a check kind of thing. Also seen it very effectively done with experts. So sometimes you don't want experts in mediation, but once in a while, I think a child was run over by a hotel shuttle bus or something, really emotional case, lots of animations and things like that. But that helped the mom come to terms with that maybe the driver just didn't see because of the sight angles or whatever. I don't remember the specifics, but the idea was that there was another perspective presented by somebody who knew what they were talking about, put that in the mind of, okay, maybe this person was negligent, but didn't run over her kid on something like this because of the way that it developed in real time at the specific site where the truck was so high and the awning and this and that. And that wouldn't have happened with lawyers explaining that. To have a little bit of creativity around the confidentiality provisions to use things that we're not going to show this to a jury right now, but here, we're going to do this because we think it's impactful and we think it'll change the parties' positions. And there are ways to use the tools that exist already with all the fancy, and again, animation was something new just not that long ago, right? It was pretty rudimentary. It was blocky, pixelated. It's become almost, you can get 8K renditions. You don't even know you're at something that's animated. And then there's Sora. So what are we talking about here?
Right.
What's real? What's not? But,
by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, Sora is an AI video generator.
And I did a little stint at film school before law school, and I can't imagine what Hollywood's going to do with this stuff. And hopefully there'll still be some Spielbergs at the end of the day. But whatever it is, we have to be adept at recognizing a use for it, a use case. Maybe it helps. Maybe we say we've had this and we don't want to see it in our session because it just confuses and it brings obfuscation or whatever. So I think all this is very great in terms of the variety of things that you can bring to the peacemaking process. But again, back to basics. Let's talk about the personalities, what the fears are. Those are things that computer's not going to understand, the little nuanced things. And no matter what you feed into it, maybe one day AGI will become the norm and there'll be some sentient being that has all of the feelings in the world that we do. But I'm still seeing that date pushed out and further. But I think that nothing substitutes for what you did yesterday. And then you're going to bring that experience to the next day and the next, and you build all that up. And for people starting out, it's also your practice experience. I didn't start mediating in 2001 with a bunch of mediation. I've been to mediation. It was relatively new in Florida. We had one of the earliest rule sets there was, but to get the judges to use it, and it's constantly in education. Now we're in our state doing non-binding arbitration. Some circuits love it. Some circuits don't know what it is. They're standing orders. It's a whole new ball game. It's a way to call the dockets. It's, to me, a form of early neutral evaluation. But until you understand the tool and how to use it and employ it for your clients' results and to spare the courthouse more cases, that's not going to see a lot of action. So education, like these kind of things, and doing stuff at bar associations and lunch and learns and all, this is the way we discover that this mediation is one of the ADR tools that really is an amazing one, probably the most popular one, but not the only one.
No, there's a plethora of choices, which is it's a smorgasbord out there of different ways that you can approach these things. And what you're doing, some people ask me, since I wrote the book on thought leadership, what is thought leadership? Let me just point out, everyone who's listening, what you're listening to right now is Lawrence putting out thought leadership. He's telling you things that show you his deep understanding and knowledge of the topics about that he's speaking about. That's thought leadership. It's out there to help support and educate and share knowledge. And it's helpful and it's supportive. And I think it's really one of the key, there's so many benefits to that, but both for the person who's putting the knowledge out there, you know that this person is someone that you can trust their knowledge base, but also it's educational. It's what's moving the ball forward constantly for all of us in the field.
You're too kind, but yes, I try to stay abreast of everything. I've had this little old blog, Orlando Mediator, and that's at blogspot.com. And I've had that. Really, it was a way of getting natural SEO back when that mattered. I think video.
Now we're into GEO and AEO.
All of that. But it was a labor of love that I just would try to pick something out that spoke to me about what was happening. And it could have been a case somewhere else, an outcome of something in the space that we operate in, or just some new piece of technology or something. And sure enough, there are entries from a decade ago that are still a piece of that thought leadership you're talking about. Every now and then when I get jammed up, I'll go back and read my own stuff again and they'll say, I need to expound on this piece.
You didn't go far enough there.
Yeah. And sometimes things don't change. And that's one of the themes today is things don't really change. We're doing that job. We're doing it well. We're trying to be cool about the coming onslaught of all of there's going to be consolidation in this industry. There's going to be, it happened. I was in e-discovery. I was a special master. I tried to bring that to the courts in terms of letting neutrals get involved before clients spent money that was probably bigger than the amount in controversy on running down rabbit holes and emails and stuff. And I think we got there in Florida later than the federal rules, but we got there and I chaired the committee that wrote those rules. Now, in those meetings, I started to understand that I wasn't some big city lawyer from Orlando, that there are people in the hinterlands that do stuff the old-fashioned way. They go trade paper. They're not necessarily sticking their head in the sand. That's just the way they do stuff. There's judges that are in the hinterlands of our big state that's over 22 million that do criminal dockets in the morning and civil dockets in the afternoon. There's still stuff done the way it's always been done, and you have to account for those people, and you have to adapt to do things that maybe we're used to doing on a daily basis with big firms and white shoe firms and clients, and not forget about others that are just, that's the way they practice. It's called a practice. People do it different ways. So to be flexible and not to, you can always go for your ideal clientele, but when you get, Susan, the type of national recognition, people are going to call and they're going to want stuff. And you can take it on if you want. You can also figure out who might be better suited for it. And we all help each other. And in the field of arbitration, it's similar. You have panels of 3. So it's not just that you're always a sole arbitrator. Sometimes if you're out there talking about things, hey, I remember Susan said, I'm going to call and ask her to be a wing in my panel. There's a lot of things that I think we can help each other collaborating, being not competitors necessarily. Sure, there's a pie, but I think there's plenty of pie for everybody. And doing the kind of things that you're advocating in your own podcasts and your book. I loved your book. I got it all highlighted. And it was reaffirming too, because a lot of the things.
That's what you're doing.
It's what I've done and what's led to that success. All these platforms, they come and go, but people are what's mediation.
Yeah. And the mediators are the core of it all. Something you just said pointed out to me. You're talking about in the hinterlands, they may do things one way and you need to, as their mediator, adjust to that. In a white shoe law firm, big law, you're going to have a different approach. The one who's the most flexible, the one who has to roll with the client's needs and meet people where they are is the mediator. That's another one of the skills that we bring to that table. And even if it's knowing that maybe we're not the right mediator, the right professional for that case and helping them find the right one, I still think that's the human. That's the human in the room. There's maybe no one more human in the room than the mediator. Even when they're tech supported. I know you use some of my AI friends in your practice, and I'm just wondering, maybe it would be helpful to people to know, are you using artificial intelligence? And if you are, how?
I haven't used it during an actual session because thank God I have recall in my brain that I think sometimes is a little smarter than, and I'm not trying to be egotistical. They're just, I was listening to this marketplace tech report the other morning, and she was reporting on a startup company of one trying to make all of his AI agents his employees and then run the company successfully. And he said he couldn't believe the stupidity of the agent. And he gave them all a backstory. This one's in HR and this one has this task. And he couldn't get them to stop tasks. And anyway, it sounded like a nightmare to me, but it was an interesting exercise. Even trying to get some things going for this podcast, I'm going to just write a blog piece about this because I'm thinking about it. And then trying to extrapolate something to talk about from the blog piece, it's almost more convoluted than you would have a conversation. And the words that are used aren't natural and things. So I think it's going to get better, but the machine learning, the association of the words, it can churn out a bunch of stuff that generally works. People are authoring stuff with it. I think you can tell. I have a daughter at NYU that her professors are using all that to detect. Other professors are employing it. I teach at UCF. Some people, they incorporate it in their syllabus. Others, it's verboten. I think all that's going to evolve, but summarizing, scheduling, reframing things, synthesizing information, especially in arbitration, I don't think I'm confident about the whole case law side of things yet. I know there's great clear brief and things that are going to help with that.
Yeah.
But I think watching the landscape and figuring out, okay, that's good for the lawyers. What's good for us? And then what can I not have to verify? What can they submit to me that I'm not billing them to verify their own citations? Because
exactly.
I think that's really key in this early stage. And I think we are still early, even though we're a couple of years into this revolution and way beyond that. If you go back to the history of this whole thing at Google and everything, it's fascinating. Yeah. And it goes way back. And of course, we've been using variations of these in agentic fashion for many years, phone tree things, all kinds of stuff and I was on last night it was the Assurion. And until I got to a human, no one understood what I was talking about. I was given one route and it wasn't the right one. And finally, somebody, God knows where, was a human, answered the phone and got me where I needed to go. And I think we're still there and we're still needing each other in this world.
Yeah. The technology's capabilities are way up high. Our use of those technologies and those abilities is way down here. We just don't know. I think we're still struggling in a lot of ways of how to take this massive technology and put it into a format and have it operate in a way that works within the construct of what we do with us, right? Instead of replacing us or doing things for us.
We still want a sense of control.
We're lawyers. It's a lot of us anyway. And who's the biggest control freaks in the world but lawyers? But yes, it's still one of those things. I do use it all day, every day in my practice with my coaching and consulting and podcasts. And it's certainly going to help edit and pull together things for this podcast episode. And that's what I try to encourage people to do, is use it where it can help you. Use it where it can take some of the work away or streamline things so that you're not having to take your valuable time. You talked about being a solo when you first came out. And
I wished I had gems and I like them in different ways. I like perplexity. I like open. It just depends on the use case, and then have fun with the Google LM notebook thing. It's great. I stuck the AAA rules in there and it created like a whole discussion on them, and it was fairly legit. I would
it's a closed system,
but it was okay. Yeah. And I think that stuff is going to just get better. I am, by the way, tired of the prefab voices on there already. So I hope people don't tire of us today, but they have that banter and laughter thing that I think they've got that down pretty good.
And Notebook LM. Yes, they definitely, those two, we hear the same two people over and over talking about things. But no, hopefully I haven't. I think this has been a fascinating conversation. I always love talking to you. I do remember us talking when we were together down in Florida for the retreat about walking into, or being the two people who walked into our law firms back in the day. I had a big word processor that I trudged through the door, and they're all, hey, we use Selectric IBMs or whatever. What are you bringing that? What's that thing that you're bringing in? And you did the same. The one thing I want to highlight about this conversation that really strikes me about you and always has with your writing and our conversations is one of the traits of, I think, the best mediators, the best neutrals, is their constant curiosity, the rabid curiosity. And they bring that in the room with the people that they're working with. And that curiosity is what leads them to really dive into the matter. But it's outside the room as well. And anyone who listens to some of the things that you've talked about, I was reading an article this morning and I was doing this, and you are one of those constantly curious people. And that, I think, has really led to you having just this enormous repertoire of skills and knowledge and understanding and the willingness to keep being curious about these things. So you're always adding to that. And I think that's a great benefit to any practitioner.
You're very kind. People even come to me for tire advice. I just have a knack for these things, but I really do think that all lawyers are curious. That's why we wanted to keep learning. The law is constantly changing. The nub of it coming from the commandments on up through common law, it's there, but we're always changing, right? And courts are changing and trends are changing and things are being reversed. I think that curiosity also is just not us, the mediators and neutrals and peacekeepers, but the people in this profession in general. And that's what keeps it so interesting.
I love it. And it is interesting. Changing from being a litigator to being a mediator was one of the most positive and affirming transitions I have made as a professional in my career. As we close out the episode, most of the people listening are listening because they want to grow a successful practice, or they want to find that secret to becoming the mediator they want to be. Do you have one kernel or one little thought to leave them with from your years?
It's, again, a real standard tenet is just be accessible. Don't ignore the unknown number. I know it's a pain these days. There's also a lot of filters and call protect and all these things, but you never know who's calling you. It could be a pro se who needs a hand, and maybe you're not the person to give them the resource that they can call next. Just being real and accessible, taking the extra time to let those people inquire of you, and whether it's in person at an event. So I saw and there's a judge coming up and you want to talk to the judge, talk to the lawyer. They're the ones going to hire you. Every now and then you're lucky you get on a list somewhere and the judge sends you a nice case, whatever. But the lawyers are your stock and trade. And I don't know why, but as a profession, we actually like hanging out with each other. It's a strange thing. You get this conference. Those of us that are bar geeks, everybody loves to go.
We're two of them right here. Yeah.
Not every lawyer in the country is busy with bar work. I think it's very rewarding. It keeps you on the cutting edge. It keeps the ideas being exchanged, and it produces some great results. So I would encourage the younger people, just start going, join committees. Here in Florida, we have an ADR section I'm a very big proponent of. And it's about just getting in, listening, giving of yourself, and the rewards will come.
Hey, in January, I am doing a program for the Florida Bar ADR section on building a successful practice. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes for everyone.
Perfect.
So hopefully I'll see you there. Not that you need to build a successful practice.
I'm always learning, as you said.
That's one big takeaway for everyone, is you never know everything that you need to know. I think that's what has made, as my career has gone along, now that I'm 35 years into law and dispute resolution.
35 years old.
Yeah, I wish. Actually, I wouldn't be 35 years, but I wouldn't mind being 40 again. That would be lovely. Just maybe have the brain of my current age and go back. But,
no Nariva required.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that constant eternal learning is what keeps us interested in what we do. And it's a wonderful field to be in. And I've always said mediators are the best people. One of the reasons that I've spent so much time in the ABA dispute resolution section is because mediators, dispute resolution people are my people. They're wonderful people to hang out with. And you exemplify everything about that. And taking the time to share your insights with my listeners, I really greatly appreciate it, Lawrence. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a true calling, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And I'm really excited to see what 2026 holds for everybody.
It's going to be a great year. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for listening to the Practice Playbook podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you'd take a moment to leave a review, follow the show, or share it with a colleague who's ready to build the practice of their dreams. If you want more support and tools like the ones you heard today, join the waitlist for the Practice Accelerator, my brand new subscription program packed with resources to help you grow smarter. You can find the link in the show notes or visit susaneguthrie.com to learn more. Until next time, stay focused, stay intentional, and remember, success starts with the right playbook.